All right, everybody. Welcome to Ladies Let's Go Fishing virtual meeting. We have an exciting agenda planned for tonight, and I'm going to start with just a few bits of information on Ladies Let's Go Fishing. Ladies Let's Go Fishing has been moving and grooving. Let's see, I think I have you on, that's okay. Yeah, try to stay on mute, or whatever we see in speaker mode is going to be you. Ladies Let's Go Fishing has some exciting events coming up this weekend. We have September 23rd, 24th, bass fishing at Guy Harvey Outpost at Lake Wells, Florida. We do have a couple of events coming up after that, but for this weekend, we had a couple last minute cancellations that we would like to fill. And what's cool about this is $175 includes a half-day fishing, a bonfire party, a free drink, a fish fry, and free entertainment. And rooms are additional up there, and it is in Lake Wales, which is somewhere near Sebring. All right. October 7th to the 9th, we have our Keys Saltwater Weekend Seminar and Fishing Fever Tournament with easy rules. Just catch a fish and win. Full day seminar with inshore, offshore fishing basics speakers. And then we have hands-on practice for casting, spin casting, fly casting, craps net casting, how to tie your lures, how to tie lines, hook the line, line the leader that you do with the instructors. There are two parties, and there's fishing Friday and Sunday. Right now, the only openings we have are offshore fishing for Friday and Sunday. And when they're gone, we're not going to be booking any more boats. On November 19th and 20th, we have St. Augustine surf fishing at the Guy Harvey Resort in St. Augustine. Fishing is included. At this point, that one is full. So for Ladies Let's Go Fishing, you got to sign up early. We also have the boat show in Fort Lauderdale. It's October 26th through the 30th. I'll be speaking in a couple slots about stand-up fish fighting. So how to use your hips and legs versus your arms to bring in those fish. And we are looking for volunteers, so you can email me at info@llgf.org. We also have an auction running right now. And if I can share that screen, and I'll be right back. But if you can see, can you see the auctions? It runs till Wednesday, 1 p.m. And we've got a power pool, some fishing trips, Costas, a lot of rods and reels. Everything should be lower. Even the buy it now is lower than what you should pay online. We've got Yeti, AO, and Engel coolers, some sunglasses, pelagic gear. Remember, there's 3 pages. So, and there's buy it nows. So I'm just only going through the first couple pages, and let me take this off share. Okay. And I'm back. All right. And that's what's going on with Ladies Let's Go Fishing. What happened with the raffle is we're short 20 tickets. And I know most of you people who are on here have already bought tickets. If we can sell like 20 tickets while the speaker's on, or if you want to buy tickets and you haven't already, you could put it in the chat. If we sell a few more tickets, I will pull everything and draw the winners. If not, I will still pull a few of the items, and then the big items, don't worry, your tickets will be safe because we'll put that on the next drawing for the same items, even if you win something. So we will figure that out. All right. That's my intro from Ladies Let's Go Fishing. And right now I would like to introduce our speaker, and we're privileged to have a woman from Miami, and it's Anna Zangroniz, and she's with the Florida Sea Grant. She's an extension agent in Miami-Dade. She's going to talk about fish release and barotrauma mitigation techniques for 20-30 minutes. And if you need me, I do have a de-hooker, and I can show how to use that.
Perfect, so Betty. I will be calling. I will be calling on you for that. All right. Hopefully my screen share worked appropriately. And I'm going to minimize the little tiles with your faces just so that I'm not distracted. So please bear with me. If you have any questions, I think it's a small enough group. There will be opportunity at the end. So either shout it out or throw it in the chat box and we can talk when I'm done. I want to thank Betty for inviting me here. It was nice to connect, and it's really exciting to work with this group of women who are all around the country. So I want to talk a little bit about some best practices for catch and release. And I want to be sure to acknowledge my wonderful friend and colleague, Dr. Angela Collins, because she is the one who has curated. She didn't come up with a lot of these techniques, but she's curated a lot of this information so that we extension agents can bring it to our clients, which are you all. All right, so before we go further, I have to do my due diligence and tell you a little bit about Florida Sea Grant and the University of Florida IFAS Extension Service. Some of you ladies were on a moment ago when I talked a little bit about UF IFAS Extension, but if you weren't, you're joining us a little bit just now. The University of Florida is home to Florida's Cooperative Extension Service. And as an extension agent, it is my job to take the scientific information that is being produced at UF, as well as other institutions around the country and the world, and take that science and deliver it to end users in ways that are understandable and applicable. And Florida Sea Grant is a university-based program. It's also housed or administered up at University of Florida. And that is the marine science branch of cooperative extension in our state. So extension and Sea Grant is all about connecting best available science to end users so that you learn things, maybe make a couple of behavior changes for the ultimate long-term goal of a sustainable balance between use and protection of our natural resources. So we could have a whole conversation just about UF IFAS extension, but before I forget, extension means that I am a figurative branch of UF. We refer to UF as the mothership because it's up in Gainesville in North Central Florida. And there are extension offices in each of the 67 counties in Florida. So wherever you live or wherever you snowboard or part-time reside, there is an extension office in your county. And we're here to help you in whatever you like. So I'm going to transition a little bit now and to talk about why we're here, and that's fishing in our state. There are multiple economic impacts of fishing in Florida. Fishing is a huge industry. It's probably not a shock that Florida is the fishing capital of the world. People come here from all over the place to fish. The annual economic impact that is related to fishing exceeds $7.6 billion, if you can imagine. And according to FWC, their recreational saltwater fishing license, those totals ended up being at about $1.5 million for the fiscal year 2019 to 2020. Jobs associated with recreational fishing, both saltwater and fresh, there's about 120,000 jobs in our state. So it's a huge supporter of employment in Florida. And in our state is responsible for about 90 million pounds of commercial seafood that is brought ashore every single year, 90 million. And of that, 84% is the supply we provide domestically in the United States. And that includes grouper, mullet, stone crab, pink shrimp, and of course, spiny lobster. So lots of money involved, lots of economic benefits that we draw from here in Florida related to fishing. Now, keeping our fisheries afloat economically, of course, that's great, but there are also social benefits affiliated with fishing. Recreational fishing is a huge industry. A lot of people want to be on the water and fishing. And because we have both commercial interests in fishing and recreational interests in fishing, We have very well managed fisheries here in Florida. And some of these measures include size limits, closed seasons, closed areas for specific species. And what that essentially turns into is mandatory catch and release due to either one of or a combination of those regulations that I mentioned. So if it's the wrong size or the wrong species or both, that fish has to go back. And in addition to the regulatory requirements of having to catch a fish and then release it, there are a lot of anglers who will also just practice it just for the beauty of the sport. They're not necessarily fishing to keep or fishing for sustenance. They just want to fish. So why is this a big deal? Catch and release, it's perfect, it's great, we're sending the fish back. But it's not a perfect system. There are a lot of problems associated with catch and release fishing, namely that not all of the fish survive being released. And this is due to a number of factors. And in no particular order, if a fish is struggling with a long fight time, by the time it's finally landed on the boat, this fish could end up exhausted and have difficulty making its way back to the bottom. And that could also lead it to being more susceptible to predators. Oh, what just happened?
I will apologize. I have people trying to log on and they can't join, and I was trying to say, change the settings. So I think we could just go back to where you were.
Okay, no problem. Can everybody see that same slide?
Very good.
Perfect. Cool. All right. Long fight times. Then, of course, considering how long fish are being handled once they're back on the boat. Is it clicking? There we go. So how long that fish has been out of the water. The time that you're handling the fish, that matters, because the longer that that fish is out of the water can lead to decreased levels of oxygen, can lead to it essentially drowning, or excuse me, not drowning, suffocating. The handling of fish is also important, how you handle it. Improper handling can lead to internal organ injury or even skeletal injury to larger fishes, larger, heavier fishes. Removal of that protective slime layer could also lead to that fish's lack of ability to resist parasites. And that happens when they're handled with hands that are, someone's wearing gloves usually. And then the choice of hook. The hook choice does matter. It's really important. It can be problematic, particularly if the fish got hooked in the wrong place, namely gill or gut hooking. So we'll talk a little bit more about some of these things in the next few minutes. So how do we get past this? How do we start doing better? I'm sure it's no surprise. A lot of these things seem super intuitive, and most of you guys are probably doing them already, because it seems like Betty has really paved the way to make sure that all the ladies who fish with Ladies Let's Go Fishing are doing the right things. And so some of the best ways to minimize impacts are know the rules before you go. In the state of Florida, our state waters are regulated by the Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission, or FWC. And so those recreational regulations are changed. They are updated twice a year. And so those are online. They also have hard copy publications that are available at most bait and tackle shops or local marinas. And knowing places where you can find the other regulations. So say you're fishing outside of state waters and you're fishing in federal waters, you're going to be referring to the Gulf of Mexico Fishery Management Council if you're over on our West Coast, or the South Atlantic Fishery Management Council if you're fishing on the Atlantic coast. And those are going to have the regulations for fishing in federal waters. And sometimes they're a little different, sometimes they're the same. And that's a screenshot of what some of those fishing regulations look like if you check them out on the FWC website. But now we're in this newer digital age. There's an app for that. There's an app for everything. And if you are inclined and you like apps, Fish Rules is definitely the way to go. This is FWC's app that you can download and have available on your smartphone, so you can constantly You have constant access to the regulations as well as stay up to date as things change. It's definitely hard to keep track of when the regulations change. So knowing those rules, or at least being familiar, there's other things that you can do as well. And that's to have the right tools in your toolbox. So those include pliers, dehooking devices, the use of non-stainless steel circle hooks. And these are really excellent for fishing because they typically minimize the chance that the fish will swallow them. The way that that hook is shaped makes it more likely that the fish will get hooked in the lip where it's supposed to, and makes it easier to remove. And it also reduces the chance of gut hooking or foul hooking. Also, thinking about having some sort of tool to land larger species like a lip grip or a soft rubberized landing net, because you really want to try and reduce the chance of that fish landing on the deck. And then lastly, tools for barotrauma mitigation. And over here on the Atlantic coast, this is new in federal waters. As of 2020, it is required that if you are fishing recreationally in federal waters, to have a descending device not only on your boat, but readily available. So we'll talk a little bit more about descending devices in a few minutes. So some of the best practices that we like to highlight are, we'll talk about catching, then we'll talk about releasing. So a couple things. Number one, targeting the species that are open at the time of year that you're fishing. Trying to fish for these species in the most appropriate habitat or depth. And trying to keep them, when you catch them, trying to keep them away from artificial reefs or high release structures. When that fish gets hooked, it's going to want to shoot straight to where it has cover. And so if that fish gets stuck or ensnarled either in the reef or the artificial reef, that's going to be a lot more of a fight. Or ultimately, you're going to have to cut the line and then let the fish go with the hook and the leader in its mouth. You want to try and limit the time you are fighting with the fish. There are light tackle options that are considered a little bit more sporty, but usually heavier tackle means less fight time and less exhaustion. And even though they don't last quite as long in your toolbox, those non-corrosive stainless steel circle hooks will rust out much more quickly if you have to cut the line or the fish gets away with your hook and leader. And that circle hook, you can see it here in the photograph in the upper right. It's designed so that the point is turned perpendicular to the shank to form that circular shape. And the principal advantage to using circle hooks is that fish are much less likely to become deep hooked. And research has found that circle hooks are more likely to hook a fish in the mouth rather than the gut, making them easier to remove and reducing harm to the fish. And I mentioned this before, but using bare wet hands, this is really good for handling the fish. If you have dry hands or you're wearing gloves, you are likely going to remove that layer of protective slime from the fish. And then lastly, I skipped, I got ahead of myself, sorry. So some of those we bled into the releasing part, but using a dehooking device. And when I'm done, I'm going to ask Betty to do a demonstration because I actually don't have one available with me right now. But using a dehooker, there are a couple benefits to that, and I'll talk through them on the next slide. And then when you're fishing in deeper water, say deeper than 30 feet, either properly venting or descending your fish if it shows signs of barotrauma. There are a few different models or types of dehooking devices, and the two most common I put here, put pictures of them here on the slide. And the benefits to the dehooking device is that it's a pretty easy and fast way to remove the hook, and you don't need to touch the fish if you don't want to. So the basic principles of this, and I have a whole bunch of videos linked. So when we're all done today, I have an email prepped and ready to send you. I'll send it to Betty and she can share it with you that has links to a lot of the resources that I'm going to mention. But discussing how to use a dehooking tool, holding the tool in one hand, holding the leader in the other, you're going to slide the tool onto the line, making sure that the line is clear of the dehooking device. And you're going to slide that tool all the way down to the hook while keeping a tight pull on both parts. Lower the leader and raise the tool, and then that hook is going to pop right off and the fish should go straight back into the water. You usually want to do this over the water if you can. That way it's not bouncing onto the deck, more stress, fish goes right back into the water. And if you couldn't envision my dehooking demonstration, Betty is going to show you. Now I'm going to transition away from catching and releasing and talk a little bit about barotrauma. And I'm going to pull back up my little square tiles. And if does anyone here know what barotrauma is? And if you do, you can just raise your hand because now I can see your Brady Bunch faces. Anyone heard of barotrauma or familiar with the term? Helen? Cool. Well, good. So we got some and we got some who don't. So good. I hope everybody, you already know things about barotrauma. I hope you learned something new. Barotrauma is a pressure-related injury. And this is something that happens when a fish, or a person for that matter, is brought up from depth. In scuba diving, that's a pressure-related injury that happens when you hold your breath coming up while diving. Just fun fact for you, take it home with you. When looking at this image here, this is a really cool image. This center circular shadow, that is the fish's swim bladder. And the swim bladder is this gas-filled space that assists the fish with maintaining neutral buoyancy in the water column throughout the different depths that it swims. And since it's a gas in a controlled space, the laws of physics apply. When you bring a fish up from depth, that gas expands, and the change in pressure makes the gas expand, and the expansion of that gas causes barotrauma. Now, I just realized I think I forgot to share my sound when I shared this, but it's okay. I'm going to show you this video and I'll talk you through what you're going to see. It's pretty short. This is one of the resources online that I referenced. So Florida Sea Grant, oh, what happened? There we go. Florida Sea Grant created this video series. Oh, it's very loud on my end. Sorry, I don't think you guys could hear it, but it was super loud on my side. Florida Sea Grant created this video series to provide brief but educational pieces teaching anglers about barotrauma and how to mitigate it. And this is my colleague, Angela Collins, and this graphic that you're seeing shows what happens when the fish is brought up from depth, that gas expands. And so often this will present in a number of different signs, and I'll go over them a little bit more on the next slide. But there are two different approaches to mitigating, or compensating is not the right word. I can only think of mitigating, it's super sciencey, but how to prevent the fish from, or increase its chances of survival upon release. And there are two methods. One is venting, which is what you just saw in the video here, and the other is a weighted or assisted descent. So I will provide those links. I'm sorry that it was you had to listen to my voice instead of Angela's for a minute. Okay. So on this slide here, you can see a bunch of different signs of barotrauma, and these are external, very visible signs that this fish has suffered pressure injury. Up here in the top left, this is not the fish's tongue. This is actually a swim bladder that has pushed the stomach, turned it inside out, and pushed it up towards the mouth. It's one of the most obvious signs of barotrauma. Here in the center, we've got distended intestines that are now protruding through the fish's anus. Barotrauma also shows itself in the form of bubbly scales, or in the lower left, popeye. And then, of course, as this example in the lower right shows, the obvious inability of the fish to return to the bottom. And this is a species-specific issue. It's usually specific to species that are inhabiting depths of 30 feet or greater. And there are a number of other influencing factors, depth being the main one, but water temperature, the differential between the water temperature on the bottom and surface, the duration of time that they are landed or on the deck, and the fishing gear and fight time. Some,
Get
some,
this information when you join.
some species like amberjack don't show signs of barotrauma, but for reef dwelling species like snapper and grouper, absolutely. So there are two ways to address barotrauma in fish. The first is by venting, which you saw in the video, and that involves the use of a hollow needle to puncture the gas bladder and release air from it. And that's what you saw Angela doing. And when you go back and watch the video, you can actually hear the air escaping, and they show you, the videos teach you how to perform this skill. Then you also have weighted descent, which uses a lip grip that attaches to some sort of weight, and it drops the fish to the bottom very, very quickly. So venting and descending, those are the two mitigation strategies. And of course, just like everything else, there are benefits and drawbacks to both of these. And I like this picture here, this graphic you have at the bottom of your screen. I'm gonna talk you through it a little bit. Here on the far left, this is showing what happens when the fish is caught at the bottom, brought up from depth. As that fish is brought up, is suffering from barotrauma. When you vent the fish on the boat and send it back into the water head first, that fish is then responsible for swimming itself down to the bottom. And sometimes, even if you've done it correctly and vented, that fish just might be suffering way too much and might not make it all the way back to the bottom. When you have descending, which is shown here over on the far right in this image, you attach that device to your rod and reel, and that weight is doing the work for the fish. So it's bringing it back to the bottom, allowing for the natural recompression of that gas bladder. If they're done correctly, both of these work. They are acceptable. They are highly, highly encouraged. And I will say that the venting technique, there is a little bit more room for error, and that's usually operator error. I don't like sharp objects, so this is something that I stay away from personally. I want to take this opportunity to highlight local application of barotrauma. And this was in a case study done by Angela and some of her colleagues over on the Gulf Coast, and it was with gag grouper. Gag grouper are fish that are found in the tropical Western Atlantic. They're tropical to temperate fish. They're found throughout the US, in the Gulf of Mexico and Brazil. And these are benthic and reef associated fish. They're found as far north on the East Coast as North Carolina, and they're intimately connected to seagrasses and estuaries because this is where the juveniles start out their life cycle. These are fish that are protagynous hermaphrodites, which means that they start out life as female, and if they live long enough and conditions are right, they can change to male. And females reach reproductive maturity at about 2 feet in total length, and the males reach reproductive maturity at about 3 feet in total length. So these are pretty long-lived species, and they form spawning aggregations in deep water. The gag fishery it's a pretty awesome fishery. The commercial fishery lands about 1.5 million pounds a year, which is a lot. But compare that to the recreational fishery of gag grouper, it's almost double. Recreational landings are at about 3 million pounds per year. These are very highly regulated species. They have quotas, size and bag limits, as well as seasonal and spatial closures. But one of the things that is tough for stock assessment measures to estimate is that amount of release mortality, or the fish that are released after being caught, how many of those survive versus don't. So those regulatory discards are a very big concern. And so previous estimates estimate about 10 to 40% mortality rate. So out of every 100 fish that are caught, roughly somewhere between 10 to 40 of those do not survive. And the study that I wanted to tell you about took place in the Gulf of Mexico, where Angela and her colleagues placed acoustic tags on almost 100 fish. And this was across depths of 30 to 150 feet. So you can see in this map that that's pretty far offshore, which is much further than we have to go here on the Atlantic coast to get to those depths. They represented a good span of gag in the depth range where they are fished. And so this was a project that was done in cooperation with recreational gag grouper fishers. So they went out on boats with these fishermen. The fishers fished as they normally would, and the gag that were caught were fitted with external tags. One is a regular fish ID tag, and the other was this acoustic pinger. And these acoustic pingers are really, really cool because they give off a sound or a signal every minute and a half. So in addition to that fish ID, they're also capturing the day, the time, and the depth that that fish is at that 1.5 minute interval. And so this results in a really good amount of fine scale data and movement and survival data, which is really, really cool. Any of the gag that were caught that showed signs of barotrauma were treated with one method or the other, either venting or weighted descent. Now, some of these graphs scare me a little bit, but I like this one that Angela produced, because if you look at the x-axis here on the bottom, that's showing the depth, versus the y-axis is showing the level of barotrauma intensity. And this is the main takeaway that I want you to think about for the rest of the night. The main takeaway shows that with deeper water, there was more often and more severe barotrauma across the board. And so this is the cool part, that after doing this project, they were able to successfully prove that best practices work. So the data from these fish showed that 93% of these fish within 2 days resumed vertical movement in the water column within 2 days after they had initially been caught and had barotrauma and been treated for it. And then 90% of those fish stayed on site and provided evidence survival for at least 2 weeks. And some fish were actually monitored for the entirety of the tag, the life of the tag, which was a year, because that's how long these batteries last. And so in addition to proving their theory was that these barotrauma mitigations techniques do work, they also got what Angela calls data gravy, so extra goodies. While the main focus was to study these acute impacts of catch and release and barotrauma mitigation, just wait, there's more. They learned many more things. So within that year of the battery life, they found that 25% of the gag were recaptured and were reported by private fishers. So these fish were recaught and released. And the majority of those recaptures happened right around the site where they had been originally caught. So a lot of them have a pretty strong site fidelity. And then a handful of these recaptures were based at distances over 100 kilometers away. So some of these fish were moving quite a bit. And we have a couple of fish that I just want to show you. And one fish was tagged in 2014, stayed on site for 7 months, and then moved quickly. It traveled about 3 miles within 3 hours. And then 2 days later was pinged 11 miles away, and then it left. Then it left the array, then it was gone. So the next fish that was caught stayed about the same amount of time in one spot, 6 or 7 months. Then it left the array completely. And then 2 years later, it was caught by a commercial fisherman 69 miles away. So pretty interesting how this study was set up to look at one thing, but then produced all this other interesting data that tells us more about not just how these fish are surviving, but just how much they're able to move. So as I'm starting to wrap it up, I wanted to bring to your attention a number of educational resources that I have at my disposal to offer you. And the first is the Florida Friendly Fishing Guide certification course. This was developed for charter captains. It's a 2-year-old program, and it goes into quite a bit of depth. I mean, yes, catch and release, yes, barotrauma, but beyond that, it teaches about local marine ecology, fisheries management. It's extremely in-depth and comprehensive. And this is a paid participation program. It's entirely online. And those who complete the program receive a batch of swag for their boat and are also listed as Florida Friendly Certified on the Florida Sea Grant website. So this is also supported by FWC. It's a pretty cool program. And so a lot of that information, of course, also applies to recreational anglers. And so last year, we developed the Florida Friendly Angler course, which is a slightly pared down version of the Florida Friendly Fishing Guide. It's geared towards recreational anglers. It's about 2 hours long. It's free, it's self-paced. And I'll just put this out there as a carrot. If you take this course and sign up for it, I will send you a free fishing tool. I'm not going to tell you what it is yet. You just have to take the class and then you find out. For those of you over on the Gulf Coast, there is a new program called Return 'em Right. And this is specific to the Gulf of Mexico, again, targeting recreational anglers to complete educational modules that are specific to barotrauma. And similarly with what I'm doing with the Florida Friendly Angler, those participants who finish, they receive descending devices for free, which is pretty cool. I wish we could bring it over here, but that program is specific to the Gulf Coast because of where the funding for it came from. And if you love web surfing, or if it's a rainy day, there are plenty of other resources available, including the Florida Sea Grant Fisheries website, myfwc.com, of course, the Gulf and the Atlantic Fishery Management Council's websites, and then the website catchandrelease.org. So please don't worry about writing all these down. They're already in the email that I'm going to send to Betty. And as we wrap this up, oh, that's weird. I wanted to thank Angela Collins. She is my fish whisperer and has taught me so much of what I know in this arena. And just to bring it home with that, what we do today really does matter for the future, and that, every best practice that we can employ means another fish for the future, for us to catch again, for our families to catch in the future. And so with that, I want to thank you very much. I will put my email into the chat, and you'll also have it with that email that I sent to Betty. So thank you all for listening and sharing some of your night with me.
I'm here.
And yeah, Betty's going to do the dehooking demonstration because I don't know how effective this was.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to show you how to use a dehooker. Trying to make myself big. Am I big on the screen?
I can spotlight you.
Can you?
You should be.
Yes. Okay. This is one of my favorites.
Yeah.
And I have a fish here. And the way to use it is you slide it. Let me put it in my mouth.
Don't put the fish in your mouth.
Mm. Okay, so you slide it down the string.
This is very advanced, you all.
Not really.
Don't try this at home.
And you turn the hook upside down and the fish comes off. Usually it takes a lot to put the pressure on, but the whole secret is to keep the line tight. I'm going to try it again this way. Okay. You slide it down the string, and the whole key is you turn the hook upside down like this. And then you give it a shake to let the fish off. Sometimes you got to shake it this way. Sometimes you just shake it upside down. There's another kind of dehooker. And this is better if you have a fish. Let me change my background here 1 second. Hold on. Okay, this is a little bit better. This one is made by Pen. Okay, let's see here.
It's still a little tough to see, Betty, with the blurry
I'm
background.
gonna put my background to what it was. Okay. Okay, so for this one, oh, this one is made by Pen. Now you can see it. I'll get my fish. This one is a trigger device. So when you pull the trigger, there's an end here. Anyway, there's an end here where you can actually grab the bottom of the hook with it. Okay, see that? Now it's working. You pull it tight like that. Now you have total control over the hook. And you give it a shake. And if you're gut hooked, which you don't like to have happen, but it does happen, you can put it into the fish's mouth and try to carefully retrieve that hook. It's a trigger dehooker device. They're about like $40. They make other dehookers. This one has a curly end. They're a little bit more complicated, but you basically wrap around the hook around it and you use this to release it. And also if the fish has got hooked, you can sort of push it down gently in the mouth, get a hold of that hook, and you turn it upside down. That's the key to these fish release items, is you got to turn the hook upside down, keep them tight. And then this is another one. If you're taking a picture of the fish, this is called a fish grip. It's by the Fish Grip. All right, so you just lock it in place and you lock it in place in the fish's mouth. Well, this is a plastic fish, but anyway, you lock it in place in the fish's mouth, and then you can hold the fish up for a picture and then let it go. And it also floats. So those are my conservation tips. And does anybody have any questions for Anna? What I've got to say is a few people have joined. I had a setting I had to change. I have a few people still trying to join, but oh, Joanne, she got it. Yay.
There were a couple coming into the waiting room as you were talking, so I let them in.
Thank you.
I figured they weren't hackers.
Any questions for Anna?
I have a question, but hi, Betty. Betty, you might be able to answer it too. Are there any gloves that you can wear that will not damage the slimy coating on the fish?
Anna, are you going to answer?
You couldn't tell. I don't know of any, Robina.
Yeah, they say the best way if you're going to release a fish and you want that fish to live is to use wet hands.
Yeah.
You know, if you use a towel to hold it up for the fish, you're keeping the fish. There are gloves, but the protective slime, I don't know of any gloves that can protect the fish and you're not taking the slime off. Some people may say maybe, the plastic gloves you do when you're doing your hair, or, some gloves that you can make wet, like that are not fabric. I'm guessing it's a maybe, but, I would leave that up to a question for the FWC. And by the way, we're going to have 2 FWC officers at our Keys event, October 7th through 9th at the full day seminar on the 8th. But that's a good question. Any more questions? Don't be shy. Okay. All right, well, I'm going to thank Anna for coming. If you want to stick around in case somebody was shy and think of a question, you're welcome to do that. And I'm going to move on and give our sponsors a shout out. And
Thanks,
thank you very
Betty.
much. Thanks for everything that your
My
organization
pleasure.
is doing. Because what's the point of releasing fish if they don't live, right?
I'll hang out for a few minutes.
Okay,
If that's okay.
all right.
Thanks, everyone.
Little shout out to our sponsors here because they make Ladies Let's Go Fishing possible. If you have fishing choices, Mercury, takemefishing.org and Vamos a Pescar, but both Take Me Fishing and Vamos a Pescar has a lot of great information for beginners. Shearwater boats, we have a beautiful 25 Shearwater Ladies Let's Go Fishing boat. It's on the market because I'm ordering a new one. Taco that makes outriggers and great marine accessories. Fish Florida, by the way, all these are on our website with links. Fish Florida, you can get a license plate tag, and the money that it generates goes towards conservation and education. Magic Tilt trailers depend on your trailer to get your boat in the water and out. Penn, buy quality, pay for it once. Fish and Wildlife Foundation of Florida. Power pole that makes the shallow water anchors. You push a button and it anchors your boat, different lengths. And then here's our annual sponsors. Lawrence, Freedom Boat Club, Costa, CCA Florida Star, great tournament that runs from Memorial to Labor Day. Get the app, catch a fish, it's not expensive, fish when you want. Hubbard's Marina, Future Angler Foundation, Bob's Jack Plate, ICOM, APCO, Seaguar, Starbright, Frog Togs, Smith Optics. And then here we have our biggest donors. So it's all on the sponsor page on our website.